We need to change the way that we budget in the state of Minnesota from what we want to spend to what we have brought in the door.
Governor Pawlenty has never proposed a budget during his term in office that fits the criteria of his suggestion.
So what we're proposing today is to limit the spending in an upcoming budget cycle to the revenues that we actually brought in the door or have in the bank, so to speak, in the current biennium. Now, this proposal would have a number of features to it, but one of the things it would do for sure is to move the budgeting process from one that is based on guessworks and projections and informed forecasting to something that is much closer to money brought in the door and a more reliable measurement of the revenues that we can expect to live on and that we can expect to receive. We also know that the current process, requires the legislature and the governor to make legally binding commitments that are, put into law based on money that hasn't yet arrived. And again, that's like building your house on shifting sands. You cannot put down legally binding, in some cases entitlement-style, long-term structural commitments based on money that is not yet materialized or is not yet in the door. We also believe this will smooth out the budgeting process in a helpful way. So this is a constitutional amendment to say the expenditures or the spending by state government cannot exceed the actual revenues brought in the door in the preceding budget period. This has a limiting effect, but it's, I think, a smoothing effect. If you look at it from 1962 to 2008, 2009, you'll see some substantial savings, but in the overall scheme of things, it is not draconian. It is important to engage the public. I think it's important to engage the legislature and others about what is a structural, strategic problem with the state of Minnesota's future, and that is we have a budgeting and forecasting system that is busted. We have rates of spending growth in the modern history of the state that are unsustainable, and it needs to be brought under control. It's been a spending binge, and it needs to be brought under control, and this will help do that.
We hope that the governor has done the background work on this so that he is able to convince legislators that this is a good idea, because at first blush, it does seem odd that on your way out the door, with a pending $5 to $7 billion deficit, you would now recommend something that you never even proposed to the legislature.
I would argue that as a percentage of aggregate personal income in the state, state and local spending actually have gone down. I am in the process of setting a date for a tax committee hearing right after the November forecast comes out on December 2nd. We're going to settle on what day that is today, and my intent would be at that tax committee hearing to discuss the state's financial situation relative to the most current forecast, to bring in local units of government to talk about the impacts of the governor's allotments on them, and I will send a letter to the governor before the end of the week requesting that he or whoever is going to carry his bill that I'd be willing to put them on the agenda and make that part of the discussion in the next Senate Tax Committee hearing. And I will go so far as to say that if the date that we select is not acceptable to the governor, that we'd be willing to move the date of the Tax Committee hearing around some to accommodate his schedule, because I realize he's a very busy guy.
This is very similar to a proposal by Senator Bachmann when I was tax chair. This actually might be worse than the Bachmann proposal in terms of its rigidity. But I, in writing and numerous times, asked her to bring her proposal before the committee, and she refused to do that. I would hope that the governor of the state would not kind of be Bachmann-esque in that way and hold a press conference and not be willing to discuss the idea, because you can see from the chairman's tone and attitude, he's perfectly willing to discuss the idea. We've got a $5 to $7 billion iceberg in front of us. And I think it would have been better if he would have proposed something of this significance earlier in his term, but let's give it some thought now on his way out the door.